Folks, we're back. This is Steve Sanson and Stephanie Phillips with another episode of Veterans in Politics. Today, our guest is going to be Logan Gifford. It's going to be a telling story, this one. Logan is a victim of child abuse and incest, and it's the ultimate betrayal. But before we get to our guest, Ms. Phillips.
Hi, everybody. I have some announcements, as always. We want to thank our sponsor, Simplify Heating and Cooling, for sponsoring this show. Get in touch with them. It's getting warmer out. You might want to get your system checked. Their website is callsimplify.com, callsimplify.com. And if you would like to advertise on our show, you can get in touch with us. We have spots available. And if you're a candidate, have a business, or you have a nonprofit, get in touch with us, because campaign season is getting there for next year's election already. Also, grab your copy of How to Navigate Nevada's Family Court System. Steve wrote this to help litigants through family court. A lot of litigants do not have an attorney. They can't afford an attorney. This is a self-help book. This will help you through. You can get a copy on Amazon. It's $14.99. Also, check out our consulting website. We just got that launched a couple weeks ago, vipiconsulting.com, vipiconsulting.com. And also, we have a merch store, vipimerch.com. We have all kinds of stuff on there for you guys to check out. So look at that. And I just want to mention that for my rant, that this Democrat senator that flew to El Salvador not only made a fool of himself and made himself look terrible, he also made the Democrat Party look terrible. They are defending this MS-13 gang member over American citizens. Why the media is all over that story and being sympathetic for this guy and want him to come back to our country and all this nonsense, I don't understand that. We're in America, and Mr. Van Hollen, Senator Van Hollen, you need to represent your constituents who are American citizens, not illegal aliens who came into our country illegally, breaking laws, allegedly beat his wife, and is an MS-13 gang member. We don't want people like that in our country. So get on the right side of the aisle and the right side of the flag and our country, which is the United States, not El Salvador. Sorry. I couldn't help myself.
Mr. Gifford.
Hello, Steve. How are you?
Good. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you for having me.
You want to give a bio?
Oh, boy. Well, Logan Gifford, born and raised here in Las Vegas, political operative for, I'd say, roughly the last 13 years. Politics has been my passion. Got my start interning for Congressman Stephen Horsford in 2013. 12-step programs do work. You too can get clean and sober from the Democratic Party.
How is he doing?
Right. Then I worked for a number of campaigns. Some notables would be Councilman Scott Black out in North Las Vegas.
How is he doing?
Worked for the Nevada Republican Party. I'm still currently the executive director of Repair the Vote PAC, which spearheaded voter ID and passed it with 73% of the vote this past election cycle. And recently, I guess the most recent title I would add is now male advocate for sexual abuse victims. So, it's been an interesting life, needless to say, growing up here, but no place like home.
Oh, wow. That's your bio.
I would say so,
Okay.
yes.
So, Mr. Gifford, you mind telling us what brought you here today?
Well, I wanted to continue to share the story, and I find myself in family court, as some of you may know. I recently filed a paternity petition in the family court to determine if my youngest brother could actually be my son. And it was a little bit of a barn burner. It was covered by KLS out here, Channel 8. The Las Vegas Review-Journal made it so far as to Ireland, Japan, RTL Germany. And I wanted to speak out about some of the things that were going on in that system, as well as other social services and how those things could be improved.
Well, you want to tell us how this all came about, how this all started?
Yeah, I would go so far as back. Life was crazy. I mean, let's start from the very beginning then.
10. 10 years
Yeah.
ago?
Well, I was going to go a little further back and explain how my parents were brought out here so we could kind of tell a little cohesively because my folks came out here in 1995 on a Greyhound leaving Massachusetts. My father at the time was running from the law. My mother had just turned 18 years old. And
What did Dad do?
Oh, my father had done it. He had a long rap sheet out in Massachusetts. He had to go back in 2004 and clean up his name. And he's actually banned from entering the state.
Wow.
So narcotics use, violence, assault and battery on police officers. Some heavy stuff. They got off on a Greyhound, and my dad had been to Vegas before and loved it and wanted to come back here. And they got off the bus. My mom got pregnant with me, and I was born in 1998, and my dad started working in the event arenas. So he was a beer vendor, very Vegas-like job. And then in everything in regards to the case, it started to take place back in 2009 and 2010. Unfortunately, there was a lot of stuff that really led up to that. My parents' continued drug abuse was a heavy piece of that. Both of my parents were rampant with pills, methamphetamine, marijuana.
When it was illegal?
Yeah, when it was illegal, ecstasy, acid, mushrooms, mescaline. Yeah. So the drug abuse was very apparent in my life. It was constantly around me. And my mother worked graveyard at the Tropicana as a porter, so I was out with my father all day. Mm-hmm. So I would go to the parties he would go to, and these people would be heavily under the influence in front of me. And I'm 4, 5, 6 years old.
Oh my gosh.
One specific story, just to put this into perspective, is that I remember that we were at a party one time, and I'm in the corner playing with my Hot Wheels, doing little boy stuff, right? And we went into the backyard. People started consuming some things, and when I came back in, the gentleman on the couch had scratched a quarter-size hole in his foot because he had taken so much MDMA, and his finger was inside of his foot.
What is that MDMA?
It's the main component of ecstasy. It's that hallucinogenic. From a very early age as well, I knew my mother was not 100% there. This is the earliest memory I have with my mother, Stephen. Keep in mind, this was before meth. Mm-hmm. It was about 2002. And my mother was driving southbound on I-15. We had passed Mandalay Bay. And I remember it was roughly 2002 because my middle brother had not been born yet. He was born in 2003. Okay. So it's me and my cousin in the backseat of the car. And she starts to accelerate. 65, 70, 75, 80. She adjusts the rearview mirror, looks at me dead in the eyes, pulls out a knife and holds it to her throat, and says, "What would you do if I slit my throat in front of you and your cousin right now?"
At 80 miles an hour?
Yes.
And you were...
What'd you say?
How old?
I was
6?
If that, it was, this was the culmination. What people don't understand, those that know me personally.
So, hold on a second. Did your mother ever get diagnosed with any kind
She was Munchausen by proxy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What about her family? I mean, like her mother or her parents?
Oh,
your grandparents?
This thing was epidemic, man. Unfortunately, my mother's virginity was sold for rent in Massachusetts.
It was what?
Sold for rent.
Rent?
Yes.
At what age?
I couldn't tell you. She didn't really talk about it. But there's newspaper evidence. My family, on my mother's side, they were removed from their family's home early on in their life because my grandfather, on my mother's side, had given one of his children syphilis while sexually abusing them.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, newspaper evidence.
Did he ever go to prison for that?
I didn't really know my mother's family like that for very obvious reasons. Mm-hmm. And when you're put into foster care and separated into the system, contact usually breaks. I mean, my whole story is what happens when the nuclear family fails here, guys. Like that's the whole point that I'm trying to make here is when mothers aren't mothering and when fathers are not fathering, this is the result of everything. So we as a society need to have a strong conversation about this, regardless of the sexual assault aspect of my story. How do you protect children or innocent bystanders when the nuclear family fails? Mm-hmm. My parents beat 5 child protective services cases in this county.
So your mom, she started abusing you when you were 10?
Yes.
And your father was aware of what was...
I apologize for laughing, but it's ridiculous because he was there and he knows it. And my father has not gone on the record and attempted to repudiate anything that I've said. Now, Steve, if I were to accuse you or insinuate that you were involved in anything like this, you'd probably give me the middle finger called BS, and you and me would need to go outside and have a talk.
Shit, we don't even make it outside.
Exactly. So he has not come forward and said that I've been wrong at this. I mean, this is some heinous stuff here, guys. And for them to not say a single word... Mm-hmm. I see online sometimes people are like, well, that's difficult to believe. And I understand. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that happened in my life is absurd.
So the incest part.
Yeah.
How long has that been going on?
That went on for almost 7 years. Almost 7 years until I was 16-ish. And there was a real fear of violence there, guys, because she made me believe I was sick. If you're familiar with the Gypsy Rose case, Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a very, very terrible mental health condition.
Could you explain how it all started?
Yes, and I'll do so.
That way, people could
I'll do
understand and try to look for
I will
patterns.
I will do my best, and I will do my best to be as polite about a visceral taboo as this. I'm not really interested in going into deep details just for trauma bonding, but I'll be honest and tell you the general basics of everything. My father asked me to stay up late one evening, and we were living at a house.
You were 10.
Yeah, he asked me to stay up late one evening, and there was like 10 of us in this 3-bedroom house. There was not enough room. It was the peak recession. We're talking 2008. Okay.
It was a house, not a trailer.
It was a house, yes.
Who else was living with you?
Oh, several aunts and my grandmother, and there was my younger brother, my cousin, their boyfriends. 3-bedroom house. We converted the garage into a room with no insulation. It was hot as hell during the summer, cold as hell during the winter.
And this is Vegas.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he asked me to stay up late one evening, and when the rest of everybody was asleep, he took me back there, and I walked in, and it's a pornographic movie playing on the TV, and my mother was laying naked in the middle of the bed. And he held her open and explained to me what the female anatomy was and where babies come from and why this was happening. And then it proceeded to happen.
At 10 years old?
Yes.
What was going through your mind?
My family's crazy, man. I was worried about my safety. Like, number one, I hate to say it like that, but if your own mother threatens to slit her throat in front of you and your cousin, I mean, you're living on edge the rest of your life. And that wasn't the first time she tried to physically harm any of us. I mean, I hate to bounce here, but another terrible memory was I remember my middle brother getting the dog. I will watch the obscenities, but he got beat the hell out of over not taking a shower. We're talking closed fists, wailing like she was Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Your mom
Yes.
did this to him? How old was he at the time?
he was 5 years younger than me, so he was probably like 6, 7, 8 years old.
How old was your mother?
She was born in 78, and if that was in 2008, she was what, 30? Like 30, 32. Like, it was like that, guys. It really was.
So your mom ended up going to prison
Yes.
for this, but your dad seemed like facilitated this, started it, initiated it, and was completely
Complicit.
right there,
Yeah.
complicit, watched everything. How come he hasn't gone to prison?
I'm not forcing the state to do anything the state doesn't want to do. And at this point, right now, the main priority that I have is the family litigation. And I'm more focused on getting the entire custody of my youngest brother. He's going to be my brother regardless, and that is my primary focus. The rest will handle itself at some point. But the reason why he didn't go to prison originally is, okay, when you put yourself in my shoes, and I know it's difficult to do, but at the time, I was getting frustrated because I wanted everything to stop. I'm a junior, senior in high school, frustrated. Family's broken down, tattered. My youngest brother passed away, so I buried him. And
My condolences.
thank you. And we were like, okay, well, my mother would have fits of rage and she would go and run away for like 6, 7 days. She was very promiscuous from the beginning and had several boyfriends, was caught cheating at work. I mean, that's what she would eventually go to jail for twice, was domestic violence and those sort of scenarios where she was caught red-handed cheating. So she would go up the street and she had a couple of known boyfriends. And the last time she did it, and she said, I was done being a parent. She said, I am done. Goodbye.
And you were how old then?
As a teenager, hadn't even graduated high school. So,
And how old were your brothers at the time?
so I don't remember the exact date, but I was a junior or a senior in high school. When she ran away, Aaron was, 5 years younger. So he was maybe like 11, 12. And then Mason, he was born in 2009, so he was just not too far behind him, 10 years my youngest. So
Let me just add something. You're never done being a parent.
Right.
I'm finding that out myself.
Right. No, and look, it's a lifetime commitment. And unfortunately, we had to do it this route for a myriad of reasons. And the main prerogative was that the child at hand was not doing well. So I had to go in and rescue him. He had attempted to harm himself. And that was when the straw that broke the camel's back. And I called a lawyer that we all know, and Sharon here. And I said, well, what are my options?
Who's a lawyer?
Right. So he said, your fastest, best scenario is through paternity court because you have a legitimate leg to stand on. And I was like, okay. And it took me a second to actually digest that, because this idea did not come out of the woodwork just randomly, unfortunately. I was first asked directly by my therapist at the time, who actually made the mandatory reporter call to Child Protective Services to initiate my mother's case. And after she had gone to prison, he asked me if there was any possibility that I could have fathered that child. And I couldn't tell him no.
And what year did she go to prison?
Like 2015, they gave her credit for the almost year that she spent at the detention center. So
you were 16, 17 at this time.
17.
So CPS came into your home 5 different times. There were 5 different cases.
Yes.
And they didn't
Remove.
recognize or acknowledge or say anything, didn't see the abuse going on?
They saw some forms of it, but not all of it. It was pretty recognizable. I mean, look at the quality of people that were around, right? My father was a beer vendor and was a known associate of other narcotics users and things like that. Most of the time, those people would operate in all cash only as well, because they're usually collecting some sort of Social Security benefit, right? And because they're incapable of holding down a permanent, full-time, sustaining job. So when you walked in and you saw, well, and then, me being the oldest, I could sit here and say, well, this is where this is at. And, I got the pharmacist's phone number up the street because my parents don't want to walk and get their prescription medication. So I'm illegally picking up their narcotics for them. Their Xanax, Klonopin, Somas, Flexerols.
Wow.
You name it, we had it in the house.
It's funny how sometimes, CPS fails at things. They'll either take kids unjustly or leave you in situations like this where they should have acted. I mean, it boggles my mind how many times the CPS people get it wrong.
Well,
I've heard so many stories.
Well, what's funny was the first 2 or 3 cases were just light, like they showed up maybe once or twice. Like that was it. And then they said case closed.
And how old were you at that time?
Anywhere from the 5th grade to middle school.
Okay.
In those 3 different cases.
How were they alerted? How did they even?
That's usually kept anonymously, but I had a couple of guests. And I want to say I outright know one of them was started from her Social Security rep who fought to get her back pay. But it was stuff like this, guys, and I'm sorry. And I know that this is just so outlandish, but I mean, the worst part of town we ever stayed on was like Vegas Valley and Nellis. And I was walking to Laura Deering Elementary School. And my mom had this weird habit of sharing clothes. So I got dressed in the morning, disheveled. My parents didn't have a vehicle at the time, so I get dressed and I'm walking to class, right? And you'll never believe what I found in my shorts pocket. A sack of dope and a meth pipe.
Oh my gosh.
I'm sitting there in the 5th grade.
What'd you do with it? Did you do it before you got to school?
I didn't. And I'm not going to lie to you because I didn't want to face the ramifications if I did dip it.
Yeah.
Have you seek therapy?
Yeah, I've been in therapy since 2012, Steve.
And what was the recommendation for your therapy?
Most people are shocked that I'm not smoking crack in a ditch somewhere.
And you're 26 now. You said.
Right. 26 years old.
That's a lot that you have gone through.
Are you married?
I am married now. Thank you for asking. My wife's an incredible woman. She and I had a long conversation about any of this. And I told her from the very beginning, because she was a single mom at the time, and I have a gorgeous stepdaughter named Nevaeh. And she's awesome, but I approached her directly and I said, look, this is everything. You're a package deal, right? You're a package deal, and I don't want to waste your time or your child's time. I said, here's everything. Here's what I'm good at. Here's what I'm bad at. Here's what I think I should work on. And you just got to take an honest account. And that's what I've tried to make the entire story of this, is that you don't have to let your circumstances define you. And I mean, if I didn't tell you any of this, you would have just known me as the executive director of Question 7, and that guy's cool.
I've known you for years, and I've seen you at many, many political functions. You're nice, you're polite, you're smart, you're professional. Never in a million years would I have ever guessed this. And when you came and said what your story was and you came out with this, I was literally shocked, totally shocked.
Well, I didn't want to let my zip code define me. Mm-hmm. Now, for me, it's important to be able to go back to those old classic spots, holes in the walls, because I don't want to ever feel like I can't go back there. But I really, really, really fell in love with civics. I was a terrible Boy Scout, actually, but I did get the citizenship and the Nation Merit Badge. And in the 8th grade, I remember completing it, and I submitted it, and I sent a letter to Senator Harry Reid at the time, because that was the one name I recognized. And that passion for politics came back because he sent me a very personal letter, and he actually signed it. It wasn't one of those like just fake signatures that, you know, and I thought that was quite incredible, but I had a lot more questions. So I started going to used bookstores and thrift stores and buying what I could, from Bill O'Reilly and Rush Limbaugh to Bob Beckel. And I just tried to learn as much as I can. I actually have no formal education in politics outside from a couple of courses that I took at UNLV. But I was passionate about it because I was taught at the very early age that these guys are the decision makers. And if they're the decision makers, I wanted to be a part of discussing what I went through, not because I want a trauma bond over any of this stuff, but the fact that I don't want another child to go through what I did.
Is that why you're coming forward?
Absolutely. In all of these...
What are the signs?
Well, you know, I don't know if I have a really good answer for that, unfortunately, because my mother was also Munchausen and knew how to put on a show. I mean, when you...
And explain Munchausen so people...
Munchausen syndrome by proxy is a severe mental health condition that was most recently brought to light by the Gypsy Rose story. Munchausen syndrome by proxy usually shows itself in a caretaker or an older person exhibiting or controlling a person or persons that they have some sort of direct control over, and they impede or promote this narrative that that person may be sick or needs their help in some way, shape, or form that allows that person to be, in my opinion, interconnected with them for the remainder of their life.
It's like to get sympathy and compassion.
Yep, sympathy, compassion, attention. It could also be to fuel addictions. My mother, just like Gypsy Rose's mother, used to steal prescription medication pads and would try to shop for amphetamine medicines such as Adderall and things like that. And she was caught several times while doing it, never punished, but that was a heavy, heavy, heavy influence in my childhood.
I know we're jumping around a little bit, Logan, but why would you think that your brother is your son?
Why would I think that? It wasn't a thought that I freely chose to have.
Sure.
I mean, look, and unfortunately, if I got to say it like this, but I think it goes to show the gender bias on men in this area. Because if I were a woman in that age and I, you know, had to bear that baby, nobody would have questioned the legitimacy of that child. But because I have different sex parts, mm-hmm. I unfortunately am being asked this question again. Mm-hmm. And it was because she forced me to finish, Steve.
Okay.
So knowing that.
Mm-hmm.
And how old is he now?
He's 15.
And you take care of him?
I do.
Have you always taken care of him pretty much?
I would say yes, except from February of 2022 until January 25th of this year. From February of 2022 to January of this year, I knew what was going on in his life, and I always had direct communication with him. And I had the ability to let him stay at my house or whatever and pick him up, but I was no longer directly there living in the same house as him during those times.
Why is that?
Because I had moved out for the first time.
So he was with your dad?
Mm-hmm.
And your mom was in prison at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When did she get out of prison?
Well, she got out, I want to say it was October of last year.
Oh, so just recently.
October of 2024, she got out, and then she was arrested January 7th of this year for a parole violation, which we never got a fair hearing with. So The parole violation hearing was ridiculous, and the state unfortunately had a typo in the paperwork. So the parole board took no action at the time and set the next parole violation hearing outside of her term expiring. So I would never get another hearing.
So how did she end up in prison in the first place? What sparked this?
I had told my therapist what had gone on back in 2015. I came clean after she ran away, and I said she had sexually abused me for nearly 7 years.
And they're mandatory reporters.
Yes.
So they have to report it.
And I was in therapy for a week straight, and I eventually met a state prosecutor who was going to be taking the case, and then all of that fun stuff happened. The investigation was conducted. At the time when it got bound over to the district court, she faced 12 felonies and a couple of gross misdemeanors. She faced 12 life sentences. The first time I ever took the stand, I was deposed for nearly 3 hours.
Wow.
Nearly 3 hours.
And you were 17, thereabout?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a statute of limitations on that?
No.
Okay.
No, there's not. And I was deposed for nearly 3 years and, 3 hours, excuse me. And when that case was continued, we made it all the way up to voir dire before a plea deal was struck, and she took a now forward plea, which is a no contest plea. And, her defense attorney maintained her innocence even up until this day. So.
And she's never come to you, apologized, never is remorseful.
Would you like me to read you the one letter I got from her while she was incarcerated?
Before you do that, who's the judge?
The judge, I don't remember off the top of my head.
What year was it?
2015. I want to say it was the same judge that was involved in a famous rapper case out here. It was in district court.
The Tupac case?
I don't think it was the Tupac case. I'll pull it up really quick.
Is her last name Gifford?
My mother's name? Mm-hmm. My mother's last name is Gifford, yes. Okay. Let me find this letter for you.
Do you feel safe now?
Well, of course. Safe from her or safe how?
Just in general.
Just in general, I would say generally speaking, yes. I don't try and live so much in the past anymore because unfortunately there are two types of paradigms that you could have, at least in my opinion. You could have the victim's mentality and sit there and whine and say that you were hurt, and that's completely valid, not discrediting if anyone wants to feel that way, but that to me never seemed productive.
Right.
I watched that. One of my aunts who I love is that person. And I had a very front row seat of watching someone who was the victim of sex abuse sit there and let that dictate the remainder of her life. And that's not a knock towards her. I've said this to her face, so I'm comfortable saying it here. But I didn't want to choose that. I wanted, because we only have one chance at this thing called life, right? We all have this undetermined amount of sand in an hourglass hanging above us. And let's face it, I believe we're all members of faith at this table. So if that's the case and we get called home to our Creator, did you do what you can with all of the hours that you were given? Because that's the one thing you can never get back. Okay. And in my opinion, and I'm sure several of my former volunteers may be watching this currently, that's something that I tried to explain to them as well, and why I was always grateful for their time, because that is the one thing that you can't get back. And I asked for that. I asked for that to help elect a candidate that you may have preferred when I was working at the state party or at any political endeavor. And I know that is meaningful. So I generally do. Unfortunately, there are still threats of violence that I'm facing today because of this case from some family members, yes. So that is...
Which family members would those be?
As you can tell, my parents have a lot of mental health issues, and so does their extended family. And we'll leave that where it lay, because I don't think any of that is credible, but it is still out there.
Does your wife know you're coming on the show?
Yes, she does.
What did she say?
She's glad that somebody's continuing to give me a platform to have an honest conversation about this. Her opinion is that it's transcontinental, it's trans-ethnic, it's trans-theology.
Yep.
This sort of stuff happens everywhere in the world, and we as a civilization need to have an honest conversation about it.
You want to read your...
Yes. I wanted to answer those questions.
And if you still know who that judge is, I'm just curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's my...
No, I know that's your specialty, my friend. No, I'm very well aware.
You'll be on the phone tonight to them. Just kidding.
So the letter is dated April 6th of 2021.
So she wrote this from prison?
From Florence McKeeler, correct.
Okay.
Logan, I've tried to write you an honest letter of the events that occurred leading up to Liam's accident, and I can't. I have spoken to my therapist, and she has advised me that it is not an appropriate time or place to do so. Maybe in time we could discuss matters, but I don't feel it is necessary to rehash what I am already paying for. You can hate me for the decision that I have made. I'm trying to do what's right for the first time in a very long time. If you have any questions, ask your father to be honest with you. He shouldn't have anything to hide since I am paying for what went on in the house. Just so you know, I live with a clean conscience and have found God like you asked. I'm sorry I wasn't a better mother, but at the time I did my best. I am proud of you for stepping up and taking care of what should have been my duties. I can't apologize for losing a piece of my soul when Liam died. One day you'll understand. I do miss you. I miss your brothers. I respect your wishes. Your mother, inmate number 1151347.
So you had no sisters? All brothers?
All boys.
How old was Liam when he passed?
He was 3.
How'd he pass?
So on June 30th of 2012, we went back to Walmart and purchased an above ground pool that was like, $400, whatever they are. We started to set it up in the backyard. This was the second year in a row that we had purchased one. And we went home, started setting it up. I called us ghetto trailer trash. So, all those M&M. Right. But we started setting it up and we were all shirtless, getting sunburnt, no sunscreen, just boys being boys. And that evening, I wound up going back into the pool to add the filter because the water had gotten to a certain point and there's a massive hole in the side. So I went in, attached the filter, got out, threw up the ladder. And that evening I wound up getting sexually assaulted by my mother, and my father watched, and there was a lot of narcotics used, and it was just not a good time. I cried myself to sleep in the small section of the house that I had, and the next morning at give or take 8:50, 9 a.m., I heard a scream from across the house, and I was told to go and check the water in the pool. We didn't have cell phones at the time, so being from the East Coast, we would just yell. So I go outside and I see a diaper, his baby blanket, some other of his stuff, and then I wrap the corner and I see him floating in the water. He had his last bowel movement and everything. So I reached over and I pulled the hell out of his hair to try and clear the distance, and picked him up and laid him down and attempted to start CPR, and my mother took over, and I went in the house and called 911, and for an additional 15 months of his life, Liam lived in a vegetative state with a trach and a gastric tube and a bunch of medication. The only thing that had quote unquote survived the drowning was his brain stem. So just basic motor functions. He would have really, really, really terrible seizures. My parents chose to bring him home, and it was a frenzy ground for my mother's Munchausen. I mean, when something...
CPS was involved?
Oh, yeah, they were involved. They ruled that my parents were guilty of child neglect, and I was not allowed to be alone in a room with either of my family members without a third-party witness being there for a couple of months. So there was someone on record that was monitoring my parents' interactions with us children.
And
sorry.
Go ahead.
This is a small house, a lot of people.
Yeah.
So didn't somebody else know what was going on?
No.
No. Really?
Unfortunately, no, because I kept it that way, Steve. I kept it that way because...
They didn't hear anything or suspect anything? Or?
No, Steve. I literally kept it as close to the chest as possible because I was afraid if I spoke to anyone at the time, keep in mind I was a child as well, a child at the time, that something bad was going to either happen to me physically or it was going to perpetuate to my other siblings.
But no, nothing ever happened to your brothers in a physically, in a sexual way by your mother, right?
Not to the public.
What does that mean?
If they choose to go and press charges, that's up to them.
Gotcha.
That's not my decision to make for them. One of them is a grown man who is of sound mind and body, and if he feels the need to go and seek justice in that way, I'm not the guy to tell him how to define that or not.
Yeah, that's his story to tell.
Exactly. And isn't it a damn shame that he still has to sit there and think about it?
When did you guys talk about it or say, hey, this is happening to me while you were growing up, or this happened?
I didn't tell nobody until I was a grown-ass adult. Why would I?
And when did he tell you?
He told me maybe a year and a half ago.
Oh, wow.
A year and a half ago, 20 years old. Finally, older brother, Superman. The one that enabled it all, unfortunately, because our parents weren't productive members of society or couldn't properly take care of us, mind you. He finally told me, and still doesn't want to go into the details because he buried it. We had to survive. That was the main priority. It was very tribal-like, unfortunately, because at the end of the day, you have to look out for you and yours. And that was the kind of, think about it. Also, on top of that, isn't that a failure of the system itself where we never felt safe enough to tell anyone? Mm-hmm. Or a failure of my family, unfortunately. And I'm not proud to say that with a camera in front of me right now. But again, it goes back to what do you do when the nuclear family fails? When people are not able or of sound mind and body to father or mother children. It doesn't take an application to have a child in this country. And I'm not saying it should. But we as a community are going to continue to struggle until we learn how to take care of the youngest and most vulnerable of our citizens. Keep in mind, and one of them was mentally and still is mentally disabled.
Your younger brother.
So how can he advocate for himself or speak up when he struggles to function regularly?
Right.
Aren't we asking too much of them? We have an obligation to them. They didn't ask to be born this way. And look, and that's why I've never outwardly said, I guarantee that I am the father or not, because I can't guarantee that. There's a 33 1/3% chance because she was sleeping with 2 other men at the time. But in my opinion, the court, when they deal with incest cases, and I said that there is a possibility, and my God, if you have actually ever met him, there's a stunning resemblance. But shouldn't that possibly be an option for a young man or a woman in my shoes? Mm-hmm. But it wasn't offered. This is a capitalistic society. We're supposed to anticipate what consumers want or need, right? That's how we generate products and things like that. So nobody had enough foresight to say, well, a mother and a son could potentially father a child, and we should test. But I guarantee you, if I were another gender, that may have been offered to me, or I could have been given a pamphlet to go to a certain location to deal with the pregnancy. But again, I'm not a woman.
Did they abuse your younger brother or potential son as well? Do you know?
we are working through that with therapy with him, and we're trying to find out. I don't have an answer quite yet. But at the same time, knowing his struggles, I don't want him repeating any of the terrible things that he may have recently heard. And I want it, if it is real, to be authentic. And that's why he doesn't even, I tell him what I'm doing, and he's aware of the press and all of that in this story. But I don't try to go into much details about that because that's not his concern right now.
Yeah.
His concern is trying to be a child again. And he's doing well in school, made Student of the Month. And I'm quite proud of that. And he's turned a lot of his grades around, and he's taking a lot of responsibility. But this is also a child who roughly 10 months ago just learned how to tie his shoes for the first time.
Wow.
So he knows what's going on.
Absolutely. He does know, and I didn't say he had the final decision, but I asked him what he would think if I actually did go public. I talked to him about it because he's 15. Teenagers aren't stupid, guys.
Yeah.
If I'm sorry, he would have found a way to find it another way if I didn't tell him about this. So some people may disagree with that parenting decision, but let's face it, we're more connected than ever before, and kids are cool. Unfortunately, I would hate for him to get bullied and find out I went to the press via a bully. Mm-hmm. So I'm a straight shooter, and I said, look, this is the situation, and we got a couple of different choices here.
Was your brother happy that your mother went to prison?
He had mixed feelings about it because at the time he didn't really understand everything. And after Liam's death, he really regressed and, really had some issues with that because they were two peas in a pod, unfortunately.
Is that Liam?
Yes, it is. That's my boy.
Oh.
He's with me everywhere I go.
Sorry.
So how does this affect you being a husband and a parent?
It's hard. As a husband, right? There are needs. There are needs that, and my wife is expecting our first child as well, so I'm very excited.
Congratulations.
So the gender reveal will be happening on this upcoming weekend. So I'm super excited about that.
All right, I'm going to be there.
Yes. But as a husband, I mean, I do my best every single day, and I know that best don't look the same. So, I don't try to, I do my best to make that time and keep her apprised of everything. We are a team, and I've treated her just as much as I would one of my siblings involved in this, even though she wasn't there for a majority of it, because it still directly impacts her. And I couldn't imagine if I were her, reading the headlines or even hearing this story constantly repeated. That has to take a toll on a woman. And, I want to be wary of that. And I want to let her know that it is because of her that I can even do some of this stuff. Her support, her teaching. It was rough when we first got together. I hate to say it like this, but I was bitter after my mother went to prison. I didn't trust many women. I didn't trust a lot of people growing up in the neighborhoods that I did because, I've struggled with just wanting to continue to do my own thing and just dictate my own life and things like that. And in other ways, too, it was difficult. There are certain things romantically that were a little bit upsetting at times, and you have to work through that. And we have, and I continue to get better every single day because she's worth that effort. And I don't want her to ever think that I'm ever going to be complacent in this marriage. That I know that I do have a long road to recover, and I'd like to think that I'm better off than I was yesterday, though.
So, coming on the show, what are you hoping to accomplish?
Number one, to say I feel the pain of the family court system. Number one, this thing has been extremely difficult.
When did you first file your case?
I filed it in late December, but it took until January 20th for everyone to get served.
Okay.
So with that struggle, there was struggles of finding her or trying to get someone that was willing to go and do the service. On top of that, there was the backlogging. I mean, look, keep in mind, this all started, and this was all derived because my sibling attempted to take his life. And I called the horses. In my mind, I did what I was supposed to do. I got him out of there, and I got him in the care of someone else, and I called Child Protective Services, and I got a lawyer, and so I did all of that.
So your youngest brother,
Yes, that's living.
potentially your son,
Yes,
is the one he tried to
Yes.
commit suicide.
yes.
Okay.
So, with all of that being said, I get on the phone with Child Protective Services, and I make the phone call, and I say all of that, and we wind up getting temporary guardianship paperwork through a mutual party that brought us to a notary. But then he got super manic, he being my father, and started making these outlandish claims that he was going to pay some of his friends that are not so friendly to come and pay me a visit, or if I didn't drop the child off, that he was going to call the police. And
Who said this?
my father, my own father. If I didn't return the child to him, that he was going to accuse me of kidnapping the child and all of this. So I call Child Protective Services again, and I say, well, what do I do? Because I, at the time, only had temporary guardianship, and this, under the statute, would be pretty clearly a clear sign of revocation of those rights. And knowing that I can't put him back in that environment.
Your father has some nerve.
Well, then,
My gosh.
I literally said, well, what do I do? Am I just supposed to sit here and just not do anything and keep him here? I'm fine doing that, but at the same time, as someone that is an educated man that wants to be a productive member of society, that isn't actively trying to live a life outside of the law, I had nowhere to turn to. And you can even ask our lawyer.
Is your father still on drugs?
That part I can't give you a definitive answer to. And do I care? I really don't.
Has he ever been arrested for it?
Yeah, I'm sure you could probably dig it up somewhere, yeah. It's probably going to be out of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but I don't know what his original agreement was when he went back and cleared his name in 2004. Also, and I just say this because it's funny, and I'm sorry that it's funny, but my father is the sharpest knife in the box, and it's a little difficult to find his records because he sold his name when he was a child. He sold his name and gave away his original birth certificate and Social Security card. And there's a man still living under my father's name today. So good luck finding out fact from fiction. But yes, that is a true statement.
Wow. So when...
How could somebody do that, though?
He wanted protection in the streets, so he got $100, and the dude said that he would protect him, and handed him his birth certificate and Social Security card.
Wow.
And the guy, like, it was so funny. We randomly used to get his mail, and it would be like a gas bill out of Virginia, and we've never lived in Virginia in our whole life. But I thought it was comical that he was still using my father's name. But that goes to show you where everybody's head was at, Steve. I know I'm trying to make light of a very precarious sort of subject here, but that was regular life to me, guys. Like,
For years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give you a list of people if you want to call and talk to others to confirm it. I'm not yanking anyone's chain here. You know, I try to be an outward standing member of the community. I was honored that David Gibbs asked me to be the executive director of Repair the Vote. Clearly, I try to have a little bit of merit and a fair reputation in the political world. And, you know, I just really wanted to hide this other portion of my life because I didn't find it pertinent to this arena. You know, I never told a lie. I just didn't tell you guys the whole story because unfortunately, my father has no bearing in my political life. Why would I bring that up? If you asked, I kept it simple and generic just because of politeness. You know, I never took it personally if somebody would mistakenly come up and ask me about my mother. I would just say, oh, she's great, and, you know, kept it pushing. Mm-hmm. But I didn't want to be associated with any of that because it's not that I'm ashamed of it, but I didn't want my reputation to be hurt. I wanted to be Logan Gifford that worked his tail off to wind up sitting in this chair today.
When does your case go? When's your court hearing?
May 5th.
And who's your judge?
I'll tell you that. Let me find out. I want to say it was recently elected.
Are you still in therapy?
Yeah, I still am.
Mm-hmm. And
I'm sure Tim could tell you guys that, but it was a recently elected judge in the family court.
Okay.
But I'm still in therapy. I'm still in counseling. My whole prerogative here is to raise awareness about the issues that compounded with this. And I'll just get to the chase with it. Unfortunately, socioeconomics played a lot of this in my life. You know, when people are desperate, they do desperate things. On top of that, the rampant use of narcotics. Clearly, we have a drug problem, and we need to figure that part of it out. But I wanted to stand up for male rights issues because not a single person from the state side of this thing has asked, and I appreciate that you are asking if I am receiving therapy, but the parole board didn't ask that. You know, and I'm supposed to have a victim services officer, and I feel as though I haven't truly been serviced outside of a couple of bureaucratic letters that were sent to me out of, formality. The fact that 28 million men a year go through some stuff similar to me. And yet we oftentimes wonder why men commit more suicide than women, or why men are oftentimes the victim of violent crime, or why men are more incarcerated than women.
And I would say that more times than not, men with the feeling of shame or embarrassment, they wouldn't want to even tell their story or anyone to know. So the fact that you have stepped out, it's bold, it's courageous, it's brave. A lot of people wouldn't do that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's even more, it takes an even bigger toll, but because let's face it, guys, I didn't identify as a medium this morning. You know, I'm a 6'2" big burly fella with a gorgeous beard. That's a fast-talking, charismatic person, but it's hard for people to recognize that you can be a victim too. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that is the social construct around this. You know, I wrote a piece on this on Substack called "Breaking the Stigma Around the Man Up Myth." You know, there is strength in some vulnerability, and we don't necessarily need to be ashamed of that. I think men just need a platform to be heard. And respect to the organizations that are out there trying to fight the good fight every single day. But, you know, they're not nearly, in my opinion, where they should be. So I've toyed with the idea of trying to start a nonprofit or something to address these needs in the system. Because if 28 million men were affected by anything else in the world, whether it be war, famine, or starvation, the United Nations would be there with a binding resolution to clean it up. But why is that not the case when it comes to men's mental health and sexual assault awareness?
You're right.
So we're just going to continue to be swept underneath the rug? If not me, then who? Who would take the mantle? Who would raise the alarms about this issue?
Not many would.
And that's why I got frustrated. And I said, you know what? I threw a Hail Mary and I sent a press release out and an email out to some press. And a couple of them bit. And that's how we wound up here today. You guys are the first platform I'm going to publicly tell this, but I was approached by some expert genealogists that reached out to me after the notoriety of the case. And these genealogists have made a living helping solve crimes and connect foster parents and helping foster children find their biological parents. They're a great group of people. Special thank you to Paul Franzak, who's a resident of Henderson out here. He's a dear friend of mine. He's the one that connected me with these folks. So they sent me a DNA sample test that is not admissible in court. Okay, I want to make that very clear, but they're going to pull up my sample and my sibling's sample side by side, and we're going to go in and compare the genetic sequence. And they told me that there's a specific range that they're looking for to lead us to find out if the genetic truth or not. And again, I want to make this clear. I've told every outlet everywhere else that if the results come back negative, I'm not bothered by that. I am still filing for custody because he's my brother regardless. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, this was the fastest route, but still a very plausible one. And in regards to this, I went into some details about the genetic disabilities, but he also came out with a very enlarged head when he was born. He was top heavy. He had trouble standing, very bad vertigo. He received services from early intervention specialists as well. He had stints underneath his feet to teach him how to walk until he was about 4. So this isn't just some...
So he had some medical defects. Sorry.
Yeah.
So have you spoken to your mom or seen her, or other than this letter that she sent you since she's been out of prison?
No, I have not had any contact with her. I only got one call from her family, and it was a lot of loud yelling, and they told me to, go kick rocks with open-toed shoes politely, and I said, okay.
Are these the same people that lived with you back
No.
then? Okay.
No, the majority of her family stayed on the East Coast. And, look, I don't have any personal animosity towards her family members. If anything, I was attempting to try and keep the relationship open. I have little cousins that were not involved in any of this, that I didn't want to feel those ramifications. Madison has Down syndrome, and I'm sure she's probably confused and very sad. And that breaks my heart to think about because, having worked with special education students in the past and worked with folks with traumatic brain injuries, some special needs people are some of the happiest and most purest souls that I've ever met. Simply put, and they didn't even ask to be born that way. And yet they take this with such grace. And it's sad for me to think about because I'm sure she probably cried a lot. And I don't like thinking about that. But, I tried being the bigger person and keeping that relationship there if she ever felt the need to. But, clearly her parents are choosing to stand in the way of that. And, that's their right. And, she's a grown woman. I'm not too terribly difficult to find. So if she feels the need to, she could always reach out. And same thing to Christy or to Austin. This doesn't have to be the way this ends. I'm sorry that this was so shocking because I've literally watched relationships in my personal life crumble over this. And it's hard, man. Or the fact that my family's kind of hoping that it is mine because that's the fastest resolution. Mm-hmm. Because there's no custody hearing then. They just fix the birth certificate and I'm given rights. Mm-hmm. Steve, how would you take that? That family's cheering for the possibility.
I have no idea.
How would you take that?
It'd be difficult. All of this, I try and imagine, being in that situation. And as a mother, I can't even fathom the actions of your mother. But it sounds like her childhood, she had such trauma being sold at, how old was she?
Oh, I couldn't tell.
12 maybe, or I'm not sure, but going through what she went through. And then that's a lot of times what happens when you're abused. Unless you make a decision at some point in your life to change that cycle and to get help, like you have done, right. You've chosen a different path. You have chosen to get help and therapy and all of these things so that that's not passed down any further. You have stopped that.
Well, I'm empathetic to a certain extent because I get it. But at the same time, she told the parole board that she knew it was wrong when it happened to her. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you know it was wrong when it happened to you, and I want to say it was Commissioner Bailey, but I could be wrong. But Commissioner Bailey said, well, why did you perpetuate it then? And that's a bitter pill right there. And she didn't have, she said that she just came from that sort of activity and lifestyle. But if you know, wrong is wrong, no matter what age. We all know it's wrong to hurt a family member. Mm-hmm. That's kind of just, embedded into our essence, right? So I struggle with that. But if that's the answer that she's giving, then so be it. But I just wanted to point it out that clearly it wasn't. She knew it was wrong, and she still chose to do it. This was methodical. This was, and I hate to say it, but I'll even give you guys the worst end of it, so you can know how expansive this was. I mean, there was a point in time that she was trying to give me a certain paralytic medication that simulates a type of erotic, certain very taboo X-rated film because she had an interest in necrophilia. So you were going to give a necrophilia-inducing medication to your child.
Explain that to the audience.
Necrophilia is the fetish or fantasy of being enamored with sexual acts with dead people. I was forced to watch a film of this with her.
It's horrific.
I mean, guys, this was not no regular trailer park. Can you take care of her because the college football's on? Like, that is perverse. Mm-hmm. That is downright awful. And yet I'm supposed to believe from the Board of Parole Commissioners that she's a low-risk recidivist going out into the community. And I said, I struggled to comprehend that any Pearson test or whatever was administered in Florence McCuller would be so comprehensive it would account for that as well.
Especially since the offense was, it seems like, for all of you. All the brothers. It was continuous over years and years.
Mr. Gifford, I think we could go on a lot longer, but time is coming to a close for us.
Oh, I apologize for being long-winded.
Oh, no, don't at all, because you sharing your story and
I'm sharing your story as we talk.
Yeah, sometimes people wonder why Steve is looking at his phone like he's scrolling through Instagram or something, but he's not. He's sharing this on Facebook. But the fact that you came forward to be as detailed and thorough with your story as you have been, it's, again, I say it's brave and it's courageous. And I thank you for coming out and saying this, because how many people, I mean, we get thousands of views on our shows, but how many people are going to see this?
Right.
And even if it's 1, 2, 3 people that have gone through the same, it
would have absolutely been worth it. I mean, it's 1 in 6. Think about the men in your life, and I'll let this be my last word, but really go back tonight if you're watching wherever you may, and please interact with me on social media as well. I'm not a stranger, ask questions. I'll be as honest as I can be, because that is the price that you pay when you come public with this, and I'm not ashamed of that. So you can find me on all the major social media platforms, but think about the men in your life, 1 in 6. When you go home, whether it's your church or any other facet of your life, or when you go into work tomorrow, go through your office and see how many men, and you could sit there and think about how many men that would have affected. Nearly half of all men will experience some form of sexual abuse or harassment in their life.
Wow.
And yet, we're supposed to like it because we have different gender parts. Unfortunately, biology is biology. And those reactions will be those reactions because people don't understand basic science. But that doesn't mean that we enjoyed it. Mm-hmm. There's an epidemic out there. And I'm not trying to sit here and say that, the other gender can't experience any of this, because they absolutely can. But there's just a glaring hole unfortunately, when it comes to the services that need to be available, there needs to be more rights surrounding those that are mentally disabled in order for us to prevent this from happening again. And we need to also do better and train our folks more, whether it's more comprehensive training or creating that material if it's non-existent yet. But I encourage the community to, take a step back, bust open the books, and let's find some studies or some research on this. And if there's none going on, then shame on them. Because this is not the first time that this has happened.
How about oversight over CPS? How about some scrutiny on those people over there? Because I have heard many, many stories, and they do get it wrong. Many times. They don't act when they should, or they act and it's injustice. So right. What do you think about that?
No, and I'd welcome that, and I'd want to be a part of that conversation, because I hate to say it, I've probably had more interactions than most people. But at the same time, I want things to, I guess my outlook is let's try and be as laudatory as possible, because you can't go back and undo what happened to me. And that's not why I came on this show.
Right.
I'm not sitting here trying to take heads and names and say, well, screw you because you're the reason I'm this way. That's not the case at all. It's about the next generation, because you can't go back and undo it. And I'm doing my best to live a quiet and peaceful life. And I think I do a good job of that. And sometimes I win incredible races like question 7. But it's more so about thinking of the children. As my youngest sibling said, he wants to be sure that other little Liams, as he calls them, don't go through what he did. Right. And that's part of the reason why he's agreed for me to come out and share our story. Mm-hmm. And he and I didn't ask for any of this, but we're doing our best to fix it. That way the kids don't have to hurt like we did.
Yeah. Can you, if you want to share your phone number, your email, can you say what your social media
I'm going to have
platform?
Mark zoom in on him for the end of that.
Yeah, as much as you want to give to people so they can get in touch with you, it's great.
So, Mr. Gifford, Mark's going to zoom in, and you could say whatever you want, and you could also have a point of contact if you want to give one.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, my name is Logan Gifford. My cell phone number is 702-357-0670. You can send an email to wearesurvivors2@gmail.com. I created that inbox for that sort of specific reason. So if people want to share, Logan Gifford on Facebook, Instagram, X, all of that stuff, pretty notable, kind of hard to miss.
Well, Mr. Gifford, thank you for coming on the show and sharing your story. We really appreciate that.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, for having me. And again, to everyone that was listening, I hope that I tried doing the subject justice. That way you didn't feel squirmish or anything. I tried my best to be as polite and respectful as possible. And I apologize if someone may have been offended by some of the content. But thank you guys for giving me the time and listening.
Thank you. Ms. Phillips, thank you, as always. Folks, that's Logan Gifford. Today's topic was child abuse, the ultimate betrayal, and we hope that this was very helpful, and we hope that it doesn't happen to anyone else, and we hope that this program will help you see the signs and maybe you could stop something before it gets out of hand. This is Steve Sanson, Stephanie Phillips with Veterans in Politics. Until next time.